You know, you can learn a lot from Lego about being a better servant for God. I mean, take this cool Lego fighter jet, for instance. As a young kid, if I would have gotten this kit, immediately my eye would have been attracted to the cool, fancy pieces, like this front cockpit with the canopy and the decals on it. Or I think I especially would have liked the tailpiece with the engine that spins around. You see, as a young child, I would have thought that the fancy pieces are the most important pieces. But when you take a look at it, you realize it's not like that. Take this engine, for instance. If we were to take this off, by itself, this engine is useless as pockets and pantyhose. When you look at the plane, you'll see that there's a plain silver piece that's sitting there that the engine attaches to. And that makes it work. I learned as a young child that the plain pieces are just as important as the fancy pieces. Now you may ask me, what does that got to do with your Christian living now? Well, it's like this. God has designed each one of us special. It's the same as with the Lego. Every one of these pieces is specially designed by the Lego company for a purpose, for a reason. None of them are mistakes. That's the same with you and I and God. The Bible says in Psalm 139, King David says that while we were in our mother's womb, that we were special to God, that God is knitting and building our body. We are a wonderful, fearfully made creation. We are a beautiful thing. And God has given each one of us spiritual gifts, talents, and abilities. And He has a plan for your life. And a mature servant is comfortable with their own identity and other people's identities as well. You see, what would happen if all you had with Lego was a whole pile of fancy pieces? What if you bought a box of Lego and all it was just the fancy pieces and there was no base pieces? As an immature kid, you'd be like, sweet, this rocks. But when you go to build something, you'd realize, well, I can't really build anything without some basic pieces. All you could do was build some useless monstrosity. It'd be the same as if you had a church and all it was filled with people who had upfront showy platform gifts. Oh, it may seem cool for a little bit, but without the basic gifts and the steady people, that would not be a healthy church at all. You know, God has created us as a church, as a youth ministry, to be a part of a body. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 12 that we are all a part of a body. And if that body was not a whole pile of parts, but was just, let's say, a set of nostrils, how ridiculous that would be. If your body was just one great big nose, how would you see or hear or do things? If your body was a great big foot, I mean, some of us smell like great big feet, but if all you were was a great big foot, how would you be able to hear or say something? Or you wouldn't be able to. You see, each one of us are designed differently by God, and we're all important to God. The plain pieces are just as important as the fancy pieces. Here's where you apply this. Some of you are listening to this right now, and for whatever reason, God has gifted you with some very public, showy gifts. You have gifts and talents that can be used on the platform in front of groups of people, and I tell you, it can be impressive. But the temptation for you is to become overly proud, and to think better of yourself than you should, and to think less of other people than you should. This is the challenge for anyone who, let's say they're a preacher or a teacher, a singer, a musician, an actor, a director, a leader, any type of servant's role where you're in front of other people. It's so easy to start to think it's all about you and to start doing what you're doing for the praise of men instead of the praise of God. So you have to be very careful, because those type of people will start to think that the fancy pieces are more important than the plain pieces, and that's not true. But some of you sitting here listening to this right now, you have the opposite problem. You don't think that you're better than other people. You think you're worse than other people. You think that you're useless, worthless. You have a low self-esteem. You think that God must have made a mistake because you've got no gifts, talents, and abilities. You couldn't be more wrong. Listen to me. God doesn't make mistakes. You are not a mistake. The plain pieces are just as important as the fancy pieces. When you look at this plane here, it's almost all plain pieces put together, and it's just got a couple of fancy pieces to total it up into the plane. Listen, you may think that you're not flashy and up front. That doesn't mean you're not valuable. A mature servant is comfortable about their identity and other people's identities. They don't think too highly of themselves. They don't look down on other people, or they don't think too lowly of themselves. They say, dude, I am made a great way to serve a great God. That's a mature servant. I tell you, here's my challenge to you. If you struggle with over-pride, that you think too much of yourself, or if you struggle with a low self-esteem, I encourage you to see a youth pastor, your youth leader, your small group leader, or a good spiritual confidant, and just share with them your struggles, because God so desperately wants to do something special with your life. But if you don't have a good, healthy grasp on your identity and other people's identities, and that the plain pieces are just as important as the fancy pieces, God will not be able to accomplish with you what He wants to. Because a mature servant is comfortable with their identity and other people's identities.